Hey family, it's Dr. Yola. Congrats, you've made it to part 5 of my 5-part series looking at kids and COVID. This last part, last but certainly not least, for me, probably the most important part, is looking at what we do collectively to make sure that we protect the health and well-being of our children. We'll be looking at their physical health and their emotional and mental health. As a mommy of an almost 8-year-old, as a pediatrician for the past 15 years, one of the things that I pride myself on is working with families to help enhance the health of their children. And given how stressful the past 6 to 7 months have been, I think now is even more it's more critical for me to sit in this space and give some recommendations. Let's talk a little bit about their physical health and what are some of the things that we can do as parents and caregivers to ensure that our children stay healthy over the next couple of months, especially as we go into cough and cold and flu season. So let's talk about sleep. I know from myself, I'll speak in full transparency. Sleep has been an issue for me and my little one. Our schedule is all over the place, right? At least for her, she doesn't have to wake up early. She's staying up late. She's living her best life. We're not as regimented as we usually are, or as we were prior to COVID. So one of the things that I want to recommend is that we really start looking at routine. Some of you have probably done a phenomenal job of maintaining your routine. Thumbs up, kudos to you. I was not one of them. I wish that I had maintained my daughter's routine, but part of what I'm telling you to do, I will also be doing myself. So it's assessing where you are in terms of a routine for your child, because now's the time to get them ready. What we don't want to do, even in a virtual learning space, is go from staying up late at night, waking up late in the day, and then, oh, now you have to wake up at 8 a.m. to get your day started. I want us to really start thinking about that within the next couple of weeks to prepare our little ones. Some of us, our children are going to be starting school in the next 2 weeks. So we have 2 weeks to get our routine together so that they can anticipate. I think part of the challenge with COVID-19, with there being so many unknowns, is that children can't anticipate as much as they need to. For a lot of children, from a developmental standpoint, that anticipation, knowing what's going to come next, helps maintain the stability of their world. So one of your homework assignments, I'm going to give you several. One of your homework assignments is to assess where you are with your daily routine and start really working on the creation of a schedule and a routine so that your little ones can anticipate what's going to happen next. The second is looking at sleep, because part of creating a routine is really evaluating the sleep that our little ones are getting. And although my daughter is getting in her good 10 to 12, we're going to have to shift her sleep cycle a little bit. So the question is, what do we need to do to start creating healthy sleep hygiene, right? It's making sure that we have a sleep routine. Historically, my daughter knew that after dinner, we would hang out for a little bit, check in with her, make sure her homework was done, and then it would be getting her bath, brushing her teeth, reading her nighttime bed story, saying her prayers, putting on her essential oil aromatherapy. She wouldn't go to bed without it. And then she was out at her specific bedtime. And then there was like clockwork in the morning, waking up, getting dressed, brushing teeth, etc., etc. But in order for our little ones to be able to function properly during the day, whether it be again in person or virtual, is the requirement of sleep, right? And different age groups require different hours of sleep, and I'll make sure to include that in this particular video so that parents will know whether you are dealing with a 2-year-old or an 18-year-old, how much sleep should they be getting. So that's part of what we will be working on. That's part of your homework assignment. The second is nutrition. The good news, again, as we've talked about before with COVID, is that over 90% of children are either asymptomatic or only mildly symptomatic. But because we have not seen large numbers of children impacted by COVID yet, and we likely will if and when we all go back to in-person school, if the number of cases of COVID-19 in the U.S. don't come down. So transmission is really dependent on prevalence of disease in a community. And when there are high numbers of COVID cases in a community, it increases the likelihood of our children also acquiring COVID-19. And with that, with some possible seasonality to COVID-19, where viruses are more stable in colder environments, there is anticipation that COVID-19 numbers will go back up simply because of stability of the virus and the likelihood of it being endemic, meaning in a normal part of the pathogens that we deal with here in the US. With that being said, our little ones' bodies, their immune systems have to be prepared to fight. That means making sure that they get well-balanced nutrition, right? We've talked before about specific vitamins that we should have every single day to help boost our immune system. Little ones are no different. It's likely that they'll be able to get these vitamins in a quality multivitamin for children, but those vitamins include vitamins B, E, D, C, and the element zinc. Those are 5 key supplements. Certainly, if you can get your little ones to eat their fruits and vegetables and certain meats, particularly cold water fish, they're better off getting it naturally. But if you are like a lot of parents and you struggle to get your little ones to get in their 3 to 5 servings of vegetables and fruits every single day and get them to like fish, the struggle is real. Like, that's part of my job as a pediatrician, is to help navigate parents through nutritional challenges for their children. But if you're struggling with it, that's a perfect opportunity to provide your little ones with a supplement. But you want to pay attention to what your children are eating. A lot of us adults have gained a quarantine 15, a quarantine 20, and our children are no different. As a pediatrician, my other hat in medicine is that I'm an obesity specialist. And as much as I don't want, I shouldn't say I don't want more business. I don't want people having to struggle with weight issues to facilitate me making money as an entrepreneur. I'd much rather everyone be at a healthy weight. But parents, caregivers, what I'm going to do is ask you to pay attention to your little one in terms of how much weight they may have gained during quarantine and beyond, and not focus it on weight. You have to be very, very careful with children when you're talking about weight with them. I focus on healthy habits. Your body's weight will go to where it's supposed to be when we do what's right by our bodies in terms of healthy habits. So I don't want you having your kids on scales, tracking weight and making this thing a big old weight issue. Instead, have a conversation with them about healthy habits going into the fall. Let's fall into healthy habits and ask them, what are some ways that we collectively as a family can be healthier? Allow them to identify areas of improvement. That may be food choice in terms of eating more fruits and vegetables. It may be cutting back on sugar, which is also important in terms of preparing or protecting our little ones against COVID-19, is making sure that we are not eating foods that are going to impair our immune system, and sugar is one of those foods. When we eat excess amounts of sugar, that impairs our body's immune system's function, both in terms of the creation of immune cells and the function of those immune cells. Not only that, when you increase your sugar consumption, you increase your insulin. That drives fat cell development, and then fat cell development facilitates weight gain. See how that all sort of works together. So paying attention specifically to their sugar consumption. The most significant source of sugar for children is sugary drinks. That's a low-hanging fruit. Pay close attention to how much sugary drinks your little one may be consuming, and then set a goal. Help them set a goal for themselves to decrease sugary drink consumption. And if you're struggling with them to reduce sugary drink consumption, one of the tricks that we use in pediatrics is to slowly dilute out the sugary drinks, right? Because your palate over time becomes adjusted to the less sweet taste. I had to do it for myself. When I was a little one, my mother put Karo syrup in my bottle in order for me to drink water. And I got used to needing there to be flavor, something that gives water pizzazz. And so what I started to do was I would take juice and I would add a little sparkling water to it. And then I did a half and half, where it was half juice and half sparkling water or regular water. And now I'm at a point where all I need is like the fruit itself infused, or I'll put a little splash of juice in it just to give it a little bit of flavor. So those are suggestions in order to address sugary drink consumption. But you also want to pay attention to all the snacks, because there are a lot of hidden sugars in a lot of the snacks that we consider to be relatively healthy, like granola and fruit snacks, fruit leather, those sorts of things, especially if our students are going back to school. What you pack in their lunch will determine how well they perform during the school day, but it will also determine how strengthened their immune system is when it comes to COVID-19 exposure. So you definitely want to keep those things in mind. When it comes to specific recommendations, like should I give my child elderberry, echinacea, all of those things, I'm certainly open to discussing those. It really is age dependent on what else is going on with your child health-wise. I always caution not to make blanket recommendations, particularly when it comes to herbal remedies and that sort of thing. I'm very granola and subscribe to all of it. I'm a Reiki provider. I love essential oils. All of those are excellent healing modalities, but I want to be very careful, especially in platforms like this, in making blanket recommendations about the use of some of the herbal supplements, because they may interact with certain medications, and depending on the age of your child, it may not be the best thing to use. So certainly reaching out to me through social media at Ask Dr. Yola, or on my website at Ask Dr. Yola. I definitely would love to be able to talk specifically about those things. And then physical activity in terms of physical health. We are supposed to be encouraging our little ones to achieve 250 minutes of physical activity a week. So if they were in school, that would be the goal, right? And I know a lot of us have probably fallen short of that goal. I try to be mindful of it, but I'm going to be fully transparent with you. Does my daughter get in 50 minutes of physical activity every single day? No. Do I make her run and walk with me when we are together as frequently as I can? Absolutely. But she's a delicate little flower, and if it's over like 85 degrees, you think she's going to melt. So figuring all of that out is something that I am also working through. What does physical activity look like for my little one? Now that we've made this part of our conversation, mine and my daughter's, she's actually ready to launch her own fitness company based on conversations about the need for her to meet her physical activity requirements. So now's the time to really think through, how do we get our kids engaged in exercise, right? But it doesn't have to be traditional gym kinds of activities. There are plenty of YouTube videos, most of the cable outlets, through Xfinity and through Verizon Fios. There are widgets to connect us to exercise classes. There are folks on social media who are out there doing their thing when it comes to getting kids engaged. There are ways in which locally, I'm sure there are dance studios that are likely offering online platforms, but we have to be purposeful. We have to be diligent in prioritizing physical activity as part of that online and or in-person experience, right? Because if we talk about high-risk activities, PE in the traditional way in which we usually provide it provides a risk for our little ones. So in a space where physical activity and physical education were already threatened, they are further threatened now in the midst of this pandemic. But if we do not get our kids up and active, that will affect their physical health, their emotional health, their mental health, and their academic performance, because physical activity is critical for academic performance in terms of their day-to-day as well as their test taking. And there have been studies to demonstrate the role of physical activity over and over again. So your third, I think I've given you 2 homework assignments already. Your third homework assignment is to talk with your child. Find out what they like. Like my daughter loves certain sports. She loves dancing. She occasionally, when it's not hot as all get out, she likes going walking and running with me. Sometimes I'll have her get on her bike so that I can actually run. I have to think these things through so that we're both enhanced and able to achieve our fitness goals. But be on the lookout because little mommy's about to launch a little fitness program for your children, and I'll keep you posted. So those are the ways that we work through achieving the physical health for our children. Let's talk a little bit about emotional and mental health, because that's something very significant as we are still in the midst of this pandemic. The first thing that we should definitely do is check in with our children, see where they are in terms of their perception of the pandemic, their sense of safety, especially if there are conversations around going back to school. How safe do they feel about going back to school? How scared do they feel about going back to school? If they can't verbalize it, give them a scale. On a scale of 1 to 10, if they're old enough to understand the difference in those numbers, on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being you're not scared at all and you're ready to go, 10 being you're frightened and you can't imagine stepping foot on a school campus. What number are you? If they can't understand that concept, then give them faces like emojis so that they can express themselves. I think it's important for us to assess both for on-campus education and for virtual education. Where do our children, where are they emotionally? I recently asked my daughter that question on a scale of 1 to 10. How did she feel about virtual learning? And she said she felt like it was a 2. She didn't give it a 1 only because she would be around me. I mean, I don't know how I should feel about that. I was like, shouldn't that at least be a 5? Like, can mommy get a 5? But I didn't get in my feelings. I took it in stride. I said, well, why a 2 and not a 5? Or why a 2 and not a 10? And she said, it's because I'm starting a new school. I don't have any new friends at the new school. How am I going to make new friends at the new school? And my best friend who was with me in mommy school last year, he's going to a different school. I don't like it at all. And I like I said, the only thing she said that was good about it was that she would be at home with mommy. And so now I'm trying to figure out, what do I do? How do I get her engaged with her classmates? Because that social interaction is so critical. It's something that we downplay somewhat. We're like, oh, the kids will be fine. They'll entertain themselves with their iPad, their laptop, their books, their toys, etc. But just like adults need social interaction, and that's been a very challenging part of this pandemic, it's been even more challenging for our children because they may not necessarily be able to convey that is their frustration, that they miss the connectedness with their classmates. So that's the first thing that I would do is give them or find out from them what is their preference? Where are they leaning, especially if you have the option of making a choice and you're comfortable with your children helping and making that decision. The second is, where are they in terms of their fear of frustration of virtual versus online or in-person education. And then the third is figuring out, what do they need from you as a parental unit, and what do they need from the school to help address whatever frustration or fears they have about entering into either of those two spaces, so that those fears can be addressed, acknowledged, number one, and then addressed. And then the last part of it is a continuous check-in. Just because your child was okay with virtual or in-person learning at the start of the school year does not necessarily mean that they're going to be okay throughout the school year. What I plan on doing every single week, every single day, the question that I ask my daughter, or the 2 questions that I ask my daughter every single day, and I've asked her these questions since she's been in school, is 1, what was the highlight of your day? And 2, what was the challenge of your day? I don't ask her how was school, because guess what you get? Fine. And then they go on about their business. I want some conversation. I really want to check in, put my finger on the pulse of what's happening with my daughter in terms of her school experience. And so I will ask, what was the highlight of your day? And then she'll usually describe something awesome. And I say, what was the challenge of your day? And she'll either say, I didn't have any challenges, my day was excellent, or she will lay them out. That's a check-in that allows us to assess what's going on with our children on a daily basis. As much as we're concerned about our children's mental health and being out of school, we also need to be concerned about our children's mental health when it comes to the virtual space. We need to check in both of those areas. Okay. So make sure that we are also acknowledging where we are in those spaces. I think it's important for us to have conversations about our concerns. You don't have to frighten your kid. Don't freak them out. Like, I'm so scared to send you back to school. But I acknowledge to my daughter the reason why I have opted for you to do virtual class is that we still have a long way to go in terms of COVID-19. The cases are continuing to increase. Mommy's not sure in the school environment how well the school can control your risk of exposure. And I'm willing to keep you out this year so that next year can be even better. But in terms of being safe and practicing caution, I explained why I made that decision so that my daughter has a clear understanding of my reasoning behind why she will be back in mommy school this coming year. And pay attention to your children's behaviors, their appetite, their sleep pattern, their academic performance, so that if you start to observe changes in how they're acting, how they're behaving, that you know to tap into additional resources, making sure that you reach out to your child's pediatrician, reach out to a mental health professional in the likelihood that that service is needed. There's nothing wrong with tapping in your village to make sure that your little ones are well cared for. All right. And clearly I'm always available. I just launched, I launched a telemedicine practice back on tax day on April 15th. So I'm clearly available for you if you want to continue the conversation and figuring out how do we maximize your little one's health as we go through the rest of 2020 into 2021 in the midst of a pandemic. All right. Thank you so much for having hung through to the 5th part of our 5-part series. I look forward to keeping connected with you in terms of kids and COVID. I will not forget the babies. I will continue to wear my pediatrician hat as we maneuver through this pandemic. All right. Dr. Yola out.